They left me at the hotel, unaware I had paid for it all. I stood there, frozen, watching my own children walk away, laughing toward the elevator, their voices light and careless, completely blind to the truth. Monica, my daughter-in-law, had muttered something about finally being free of the burden, and they all laughed. I had heard every word, every cruel syllable burned into my chest, but I held my tongue. They didn't know what I had done. They didn't know I had paid for every single cent of that reservation, the fruit of 8 months of secret sacrifice, of Sundays spent selling pies in the town square, stashing coins in a tin hidden behind cans of beans. They didn't know what I was about to do, but this wasn't how it started. To understand, you have to go back 3 weeks earlier, to a Tuesday afternoon when the sunlight streamed warmly through my kitchen window, painting my small, neat home in golden hues. I was preparing my afternoon coffee, the routine of my days since my husband passed 4 years ago. My life had shrunk to quiet hours, cooking, cleaning, and the occasional Sunday baking for neighbors. Then my phone rang. It was Raphael, my eldest son. That soft, persuasive voice of his that always demanded my attention without seeming to ask for it. "Mom, I have an idea," he said, and the familiar flutter hit my chest. The one that always came when my children included me, when I felt needed. "What is it, darling?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, normal, though my heart raced. "How about a family trip for the holidays? All of us together, like in the good old days?" The words were a gift. Memories of laughter-filled holidays, long car rides, and family photos flooded me, and my eyes threatened to spill tears. "That sounds wonderful, son. When?" "The first week of January. 7 days. All of us. Monica, Diego, Anna, the kids, and of course you. One big happy family," he said, his voice warm, teasing the vision of happiness. I paused. My chest ached with longing. It had been years since I felt included, truly included. I was always the one who served, who cleared the dishes, who quietly observed while my family shared stories of work, vacations, and personal achievements. I was the background, the invisible mother, the one who gave everything and received so little in return. "When would we go?" I asked, fighting the tremor in my voice. "First week of January," he repeated. "And there's just one thing. The hotel requires one person to make the reservation. Could you handle that, Mom? We'll pay you back." I should have hesitated, the numbers flashing in my mind, my meager pension and savings, but I didn't. This was my chance to be part of something more than silent meals and lonely nights. "Of course, son," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "You can count on me." That afternoon, I called the hotel. The voice on the other end was polite, professional, a soft lilt that made me momentarily forget the anxiety building in my chest. "Golden Palms Hotel, how may I help you?" "I'd like to make a reservation for 12 people," I said, my voice shaking slightly with excitement. The click of the keyboard followed. "Perfect, ma'am. For which dates?" "January 2nd to the 9th. 5 family suites, all inclusive." The receptionist's voice turned clinical as she quoted the total, $4,200. I stopped breathing. $4,200. My pension was $800 a month. I had spent 8 months selling pies, sewing for neighbors, saving every coin I could. "I didn't have enough, ma'am." The receptionist's voice brought me back. "Can I confirm the reservation?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." "Can I pay later?" "Half the amount is required as a deposit." $2,100. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of that number. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my rocking chair, counting and recounting every dollar I had. 50 in cash, savings meant for emergencies, my wedding ring, 42 years, a diamond my husband had given me, small but bright, a reminder of decades I had spent loving and giving. The next morning, I walked to Mr. Jenkins's jewelry store downtown. He knew me, my whole family. "Estella, how are you?" He asked warmly. I need to sell this," I said, showing him the ring. He examined it with care. $800. It's a good piece. $800 for 42 years of love, of sacrifice, of nights spent worrying about everyone but myself. My stomach ached, but I thought of Raphael's excitement, the chance for our family to be together, and I nodded. "It's a deal." With that money in my savings, I called the hotel. Deposit paid. Reservation confirmed. I had done it. 5 family suites, 12 people, 7 days, all in my name. Over the next few weeks, I continued to make sacrifices, walking instead of taking the bus, eating less, turning down the heat, continuing my pie sales. Each coin saved, each hardship endured, was worth the dream of seeing my family happy. 3 days before the trip, Raphael called, bubbling with excitement. "Mom, we can't wait. The kids are so excited. Monica has everything packed. How are the preparations?" "All ready. Just the final payment," I said, masking the exhaustion that had begun to sink into my bones. "Well, we'll figure that out at the hotel. The important thing is having fun," I smiled. It was worth every penny, every sacrifice. I wanted nothing more than 7 perfect days with the people I loved most. The morning of the trip, I woke before sunrise, my suitcase packed carefully, my best dresses folded, pearls around my neck, comfortable shoes ready for the beach. I felt like a child on Christmas morning, the thrill of anticipation filling me with life. Raphael honked outside at 7:30 a.m. I locked the door behind me and walked to the car, smiling, heart light, in the passenger seat. Monica scrolled on her phone. The grandchildren were absorbed in their tablets. I greeted them cheerfully. Only the kids responded. The adults barely looked up. The drive began. My heart still held hope. Perhaps the weekend would heal years of neglect. Perhaps I would finally feel included, loved, appreciated. Little did I know that drive was the calm before the storm. The laughter, the dismissive glances, the cold words, they were only the beginning. And that hotel lobby, empty of warmth and acknowledgement, was where I would finally see the truth. The family I had sacrificed everything for was blind to my love, and the game had just begun. I had no idea what was about to unfold, but I knew one thing: they would never underestimate me again. The hotel loomed ahead, gleaming like a promise in the morning sun. Its white walls reflected the light, the palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the fountains sparkled as though inviting us into a world of warmth and happiness. I could almost hear the laughter I had imagined in my head, the laughter of my family, of children running across the pool deck, of a mother finally embraced by the ones she loved. I tightened my grip on my purse, which held my carefully stashed money, and I felt my chest swell with anticipation. We pulled up to the valet, and Raphael jumped out, adjusting his jacket like a man who belonged here, who had earned this life effortlessly. "Mom, come on," he said with that charming smile. "Let's get our rooms and settle in." I opened the door, smiling at my grandchildren. They were too absorbed in their gadgets to notice me, but I ignored it. My heart could not be stolen by their indifference today. I followed Raphael inside. The lobby was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers reflected the sunlight streaming through massive windows. The scent of fresh flowers mingled with the salty air of the coast. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe in the joy I had imagined for months. We approached the front desk, where a young man greeted us. "Welcome to Golden Palms Hotel. Are you checking in?" "Yes, 5 suites," I said, trying to sound confident, though my fingers were clammy. "Under the name Estella Hart." "Ah, yes. I have your reservation here. Everything is all set. I see the full payment was made. Excellent. You'll be in the Ocean View Suites on the 4th floor. Enjoy your stay." The words were simple, but they carried a weight of validation that my family would never give me. I smiled, but I was not yet aware of the shadows creeping just behind the bright lobby lights. Raphael turned to me, patting my shoulder. "Great job, Mom. We owe you for this, we really do." I nodded, pretending to brush off the compliment. The truth was, the debt I had incurred to make this happen weighed heavily on my mind. I had sacrificed so much, my comfort, my savings, even the precious wedding ring from my husband, to give them a perfect family vacation. Yet their smiles and thanks felt hollow. Monica, as usual, had her phone in her hand, scrolling through social media as if the real world around her were a backdrop to her online presence. She barely acknowledged me. Diego, my younger son, leaned against the desk, lazily talking to his sister Anna about their plans for the spa. Not once did they pause to notice the careful effort I had put into orchestrating this trip. The kids, of course, were oblivious to everything but their own excitement. Little Anna grabbed my hand, dragging me toward the elevators. "Grandma! Hurry, the pool! The beach!" I followed, letting the child pull me along, smiling inwardly. They were innocent, unaware of the tension brewing between the adults. The very adults I had sacrificed everything for. As we rode the elevator to the 4th floor, I felt my chest tighten. Something in the way Raphael glanced at Monica, something in the dismissive shrug Diego gave me, told me that this trip might not be the joyous reunion I had imagined. The doors opened, and the scent of the ocean mingled with the clean, polished air of the hallway. Our suites were lined up side by side, doors pristine, each one waiting for us. I took a deep breath, feeling a rare sense of pride. I had done this. I had made this happen. But as I helped Anna drag her suitcase into the room, I caught a glimpse of Monica's expression. She looked at me with something unreadable, an almost imperceptible frown, a twitch of impatience. It made my heart sink. Raphael was oblivious. "Mom, you'll love your room. Ocean view, king bed, everything's perfect." "Yes," I murmured, smiling, though a tiny knot of unease had formed in my stomach. Once the kids were settled, I decided to explore the hotel myself. I walked down the corridors, past families laughing, past couples holding hands, past other grandparents enjoying the fruits of their labor. I felt a mixture of joy and anxiety. Would my family even appreciate this? Would they notice the sacrifices I had made? The first evening passed quietly. Dinner was served in the hotel's grand dining hall. The children were excited, chattering endlessly about the buffet, the desserts, the activities planned for the next day. I tried to join in, but every attempt at conversation was met with distracted glances or polite nods. Raphael told me to relax, to enjoy the meal, but I could see his eyes flicking toward Monica, toward the other diners, as if I were background scenery. And then it happened, the first real sting. Monica leaned across the table, speaking in a tone I couldn't quite catch, and Raphael laughed. I saw her lips curl into that dismissive smile I had come to know too well. The words were soft, but the meaning was unmistakable. I tried to focus on the children, on their joy, but it was like a cold wind had blown through my chest. Later that night, in the quiet of my suite, I counted the remaining money I had for the week. My savings were stretched thin. I had used almost every penny, every resource to ensure their comfort. And yet, in the way they ignored me, laughed at the slightest joke, or rolled their eyes when I suggested a family activity, I realized that nothing I could do would earn their respect, or their gratitude. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by the growing realization that I had built a dream on sand. The next day, I awoke determined. If they would not see my value, they would not take it for granted. Morning brought another revelation. While preparing for breakfast, I overheard Diego and Raphael talking outside the suite doors. "Did Mom pay for everything?" Diego asked casually. "I think so," Raphael replied. "But who cares? She always does. We'll figure it out later. Let's just enjoy ourselves." Enjoy themselves. The words hit me harder than any insult could. For months, I had saved, scrimped, sacrificed. I had emptied my heart and pockets to give them a perfect holiday. And they didn't even care. They didn't see me. They didn't see the woman who had given up so much for them. The realization crystallized in my mind. I was invisible to the people I loved most. And yet, I could not allow despair to take over. No, if they refused to recognize me, I would find a way to make them understand. I decided to take the children for the first activity of the day, the pool. As I walked toward them, I felt a quiet fire kindling inside me. This trip would not end in silence or submission. They would learn, one way or another, that I was not to be ignored. The hotel pool was bustling, children squealing with delight, parents lounging on deck chairs, lifeguards watching with quiet vigilance. I guided the kids to the shallow end, watching them splash, laughing, their innocence a balm to my aching heart. But as I observed my family, a pattern emerged. Monica was scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. Raphael was on a call, discussing business matters, while Diego lounged on a chair, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. The children were happy, yes, but only because I ensured every detail, every snack, every floaty was ready for them. My labor was invisible, my devotion unnoticed. By mid-afternoon, the tension reached its peak. While helping Anna climb into a float, I overheard Monica talking to a friend on the phone. "Honestly, it's so much work having her here," she said, her voice sharp. "She tries so hard, but she's just old-fashioned." "We don't need her fussing around," I froze. The words cut deeper than knives. She had described me as a burden, a nuisance, right in the place I had worked so hard to create joy for them. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to cry, but I remained silent. Instead, I smiled at Anna, pushing her gently on the float, letting her giggle wash over me. I realized something crucial. Anger would not serve me. Patience, observation, and planning, those were my tools. They had underestimated me, and that was their first mistake. As the sun set that evening, painting the ocean with streaks of gold and crimson, I sat on the balcony, looking down at my family. Raphael was laughing at one of Monica's jokes. Diego was sprawled lazily on a lounge chair, and the children were blissfully unaware of the tension simmering around them. I sipped my tea, thinking. This was the moment I needed. I could either continue as the invisible mother, the unpaid servant, or I could start taking control. I could let them learn, in ways they would never forget, the cost of their neglect and arrogance. And I smiled quietly. For the first time in days, the first betrayal had revealed itself, raw and undeniable. But this was only the beginning. The real test, the awakening of their awareness was coming, and I was ready. The morning sun spilled gold across the hotel lobby, but inside, the warmth I had imagined was nowhere to be found. The grandeur of the Golden Palms Hotel, with its towering ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and polished marble floors, did little to hide the chill that had begun to creep into my heart. I had hoped that this trip would finally bridge the gap that had formed over the years, that my family would see me not just as a caretaker, but as a beloved mother, a grandmother, a person with dreams and desires of her own. I followed Raphael and Monica toward the concierge desk, my heels clicking softly against the marble. The children skipped ahead, their laughter echoing against the walls. For a moment, I let myself imagine a perfect scene. Us walking together, chatting, sharing stories, smiles all around. But the reality was starkly different. Monica barely acknowledged my presence, and Raphael's attention seemed divided between me and his phone. Diego, lounging in his designer polo and perfectly polished shoes, hadn't even asked if I was comfortable in my suite. We reached the desk, and I prepared myself to check on the final payment, to ensure that everything was in order for the week. The young concierge smiled warmly. "Good morning, Ms. Hart. Your suite keys are ready. I see that the reservation was fully paid, thank you." "Thank you," I said, feeling a flicker of satisfaction. But before I could hand over my identification, Raphael stepped forward. "Mom," he said casually, "we'll take care of the rooms. Don't worry about it." His words, meant to be reassuring, stung instead. They implied that my effort, my sacrifice, my careful planning were insignificant. I smiled politely, hiding the sharpness that threatened to break through. Monica glanced at me, then back at her phone, scrolling lazily. "Yes, thank you, Estella," she said with a voice that could have passed for polite, but was laced with subtle condescension. I handed over the keys and followed my family to the elevators. The children clung to me, excitedly chattering about the pool and the beach, their joy a sharp contrast to the tension that clung to the adults. I focused on them, taking solace in their innocence. As we arrived on the 4th floor, I led the way to my suite. I had chosen the blue curtains, the ocean view balcony, imagining us waking to the sound of waves, feeling the salt air on our faces. But the moment we stepped into the room, my heart sank. The first thing I noticed was the lack of acknowledgement from my family. Monica immediately plopped her suitcase on the bed, ignoring my greeting. Raphael sank into a chair, checking his phone, while Diego wandered to the balcony without a word. I took a deep breath. Perhaps I thought, this is just nerves. Maybe it will improve once we settle in. But it didn't. That evening, as we prepared for dinner, the first real act of betrayal unfolded. I had spent hours planning the perfect family seating arrangement, making sure the children were happy, the adults comfortable, and that the table was set to foster conversation. I had even brought a small gift for each of them. A token of love and effort they would never suspect came at such a cost. As we sat down, Monica leaned back, arms crossed, and whispered to Raphael. I couldn't hear the exact words, but the sneer on her face and the glint in Raphael's eye spoke volumes. They laughed quietly, and though they tried to mask it, the sound reached me. They were mocking me, the woman who had orchestrated this entire trip. I felt my chest tighten, anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I kept my composure. I smiled at the children, trying to shield them from the sting of their parents' cruelty. After dinner, I wandered the hotel halls, observing the families around me. Couples walked hand in hand, grandparents shared stories with grandchildren, and laughter filled the air. I felt both isolated and resolute. They thought they could dismiss me, ignore my sacrifices, belittle my efforts, and I would remain passive. But I realized something crucial that night. I would not be invisible. Not anymore. The next morning brought an even sharper betrayal. While helping Anna with breakfast, I overheard Raphael and Diego in the hallway outside my suite. Mom really went all out, Diego said. I mean, she spent who knows how much. And all for us. Yeah, but she'll never admit it, Raphael replied. We can just let her think she's doing something special. It's not like she expects anything back anyway. The words hit me like a physical blow. For weeks, I had sacrificed every penny, every moment, every ounce of energy to create this perfect family experience. And they were laughing at me behind my back. They didn't see me. They didn't appreciate me. They took for granted every effort, every detail, every plan. I could have stormed out, screamed, demanded recognition. But instead, I smiled to myself. Patience, I reminded myself. Observation. Strategy. If they wanted to underestimate me, that would be their greatest mistake. The days that followed were a delicate balance of watching, learning, and planning. I observed how Raphael deferred to Monica, how Diego dismissed my suggestions, how the children, blissfully unaware, were the only ones who appreciated my presence. I cataloged every slight, every dismissive glance, every whispered comment. Then came the first subtle opportunity for revenge. One afternoon, while the family lounged by the pool, I discovered that the hotel offered special perks for the person who had made the reservation, the guest of honor benefits, including complimentary spa treatments, priority reservations, and exclusive dining experiences. None of them had bothered to ask or even notice that the trip was under my name. I decided, quietly and carefully, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I spoke to the concierge, arranging the spa treatments for myself, booking the best table for dinner in the exclusive restaurant, and securing a surprise chocolate tasting for the children. I did all of this without telling them, letting them continue in their ignorance, basking in their arrogance. The effect was subtle, but profound. As the days went on, my presence began to shift from invisible to noticed. The children were delighted by my surprises, and Raphael and Monica had no idea that the woman they mocked was quietly taking control of the trip. I felt a thrill of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years, but the true test came when they realized, slowly and painfully, that their mother, the woman they had underestimated, dismissed and mocked, was far from powerless. One evening, as we returned from dinner, Raphael discovered that the exclusive spa treatment for himself had been booked for me instead. His annoyance was palpable. "Mom," he said, incredulous, "why did you take my reservation?" I smiled sweetly, the kind of smile that concealed both triumph and restraint. "I thought you wouldn't mind if I tried something new," I said. Monica's face turned red. "Estella, you—" "Shh," I interrupted softly but firmly. "Let's enjoy the evening. The children will love it." They had no choice but to follow along, and in that moment, the dynamic began to shift. For the first time, they realized that I had agency, that I had power, that their assumptions about my passivity were completely wrong. The week continued with a mixture of tension and delight. The children remained blissfully happy, unaware of the undercurrents. The adults grew increasingly aware that I was not the woman they thought I was. I reveled in the quiet satisfaction of subtle control, of strategic planning, of gentle, undeniable power. By the final days of our stay, Raphael and Monica were forced to acknowledge that the trip, while enjoyable for the children, had been orchestrated entirely by me. They could no longer ignore my presence, my decisions, or my influence. And as I watched the ocean waves crash against the shore, I felt a sense of calm satisfaction. The first betrayal had been painful, sharp, and undeniable, but it had also revealed something vital. I was stronger than they ever realized. And the true awakening, the moment they would understand the cost of their arrogance and neglect, was only just beginning. The hotel, once a place of hope and imagined joy, had become the stage for a subtle, slow-burning reckoning. And I, the woman they dismissed as weak, invisible, and old-fashioned, was finally ready to write the next chapter in a story they would never forget. The morning air was crisp as I stepped onto the balcony of my suite, the soft hum of the ocean in the background, and the distant laughter of my grandchildren floating up from the pool below. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the moment. The week had begun innocently enough, with plans, laughter, and anticipation. But beneath the surface, a quiet storm was brewing, a reckoning my family would never see coming. After the first few days, it had become clear that Raphael and Monica were unaware of just how much I had invested in this trip. Their dismissive behavior, their quiet mockery, and their lack of acknowledgement had been an insult, but one that I intended to turn to my advantage. I had realized that they were predictable, easily distracted, and, most importantly, arrogant. An arrogance, I knew, was a flaw that could be exploited. The children were blissfully unaware of the tension. Diego and Anna played in the pool, shrieking with delight as I floated them on colorful inflatables. I watched them, a pang of sadness mingling with love. These were the moments I had hoped for, the glimpses of happiness that had made my sacrifices worthwhile. But the adults needed a lesson. It began subtly. That morning, I approached the concierge once more, this time inquiring about the hotel's activity schedule. I pretended to be indecisive, overwhelmed by options, consulting the brochures with exaggerated attention. "I'm not sure what the children would enjoy most," I said softly, smiling as if lost in thought. The concierge suggested a few activities, highlighting the most popular, the most exciting, the most memorable experiences for families. I nodded, pretending to weigh the options. Later, when Raphael suggested a golf outing, I mentioned casually that the children might enjoy a beach scavenger hunt, one that required guidance, patience, and careful supervision. It could be fun for them, and I'd love to help organize it, I added sweetly. Raphael and Monica exchanged glances. "Sure, Mom, whatever works," Monica replied, already distracted by her phone. And just like that, I had subtly claimed the day, placing myself at the center of the children's attention and activities, while the adults continued their carefree routines, oblivious to the quiet control I was exerting. As the day unfolded, my influence became increasingly apparent. The scavenger hunt was a success. Anna squealed with delight as she discovered hidden treasures. Diego ran along the shore with laughter ringing out, and even Raphael found himself reluctantly impressed. Monica, frustrated that her children's attention was diverted away from her, scowled silently, her irritation palpable. But I remained calm, serene, smiling at every moment of joy I had orchestrated. By midweek, the subtle shift was undeniable. I had carefully begun to take the reins of every family activity, every meal, every outing. When they booked reservations at the hotel's restaurant, I ensured that our table overlooked the ocean, that the children's favorites were included in the menu, and that the service was impeccable. Raphael and Monica might have assumed they were guiding the plans, but in reality, I had anticipated every detail, orchestrating each moment to perfection. One evening, while the family gathered for dinner, I executed another subtle maneuver. I had overheard Monica complaining about the cost of the hotel on the phone earlier that day, her voice tinged with frustration. I smiled to myself as I arranged the table for the children, ensuring they were seated with me, and subtly ensured that Monica and Raphael were aware that I had booked the chef's special for them at no extra charge. As they arrived, I greeted them warmly. "I thought we might try something different tonight," I said, gesturing to the beautifully set table. Their expressions, a mixture of surprise and hesitation, were exactly what I had hoped for. The children beamed, and Monica, momentarily caught off guard, had no choice but to follow along. The night unfolded with laughter. The children delighted with the special treats I had arranged, while Monica and Raphael remained aware, though silent, of my quiet mastery over the evening. Each moment, each smile from the children, reinforced my resolve. They had underestimated me. They had assumed that I would remain passive, that I would be grateful simply to be included. But I was no longer invisible, and I'd begun to reclaim the respect they had denied me for so long. The next morning, I introduced another element into the mix, a series of small surprises designed to challenge their assumptions and assert my presence. I had learned that the hotel offered a limited number of private cabanas on the beach, and I had reserved one in secret, decorating it with colorful cushions and blankets for the children. When they discovered it, their delight was unmistakable, and Raphael and Monica were once again forced to acknowledge my foresight and planning. Throughout the day, I orchestrated each activity with precision. I guided the children through sandcastle competitions, organized a miniature treasure hunt, and even arranged for a surprise ice cream cart to visit our cabana. Each detail was designed to highlight my role in creating joy and order, while simultaneously exposing the adults' inattentiveness. By mid-afternoon, I noticed a subtle change in their demeanor. Raphael, who had previously been dismissive, now glanced at me with a hint of caution. Monica, who had mocked and belittled me, found herself forced to rely on my guidance for the children's activities. Diego, who had lounged lazily by the pool, now observed me with a quiet respect, acknowledging, perhaps unconsciously, the meticulous care with which I had orchestrated the day. That evening, as we returned to our suites, I sensed a shift in the family dynamic. They had begun to recognize, however reluctantly, that I was not merely a background figure, a silent provider, or a passive participant. I was present, engaged, capable, and my quiet control over the week's events had begun to unsettle them. In the privacy of my suite, I reflected on the subtle victories of the day. Each small act of planning, each orchestrated delight, was a step toward reclaiming the respect and acknowledgement that had long been denied to me. I realized that true power did not always come from confrontation or anger. It often came from patience, observation, and strategic action. By the end of the week, the transformation was evident. The children remained blissfully happy, their laughter a testament to my careful orchestration, while the adults, though still oblivious to many details, had begun to recognize the depth of my involvement. The subtle shift in power was mine to wield, and I did so with quiet satisfaction. The week at the hotel had begun as a potential humiliation, a display of my family's indifference and arrogance. But through patience, strategy, and careful orchestration, I had begun to turn the tide. They had underestimated me, dismissed me, mocked me, but their assumptions were being dismantled piece by piece by the very person they had sought to belittle. As I watched the sunset from my suite balcony, the sky ablaze with oranges and purples, I felt a sense of triumph. The quiet reckoning had begun, and by the end of this week, my family would finally understand the cost of their arrogance, the depth of my love, and the strength of my resolve. And as the first stars began to appear in the evening sky, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would never underestimate me again. The 5th day of our stay dawned bright and clear, with the sun spilling over the hotel terraces, reflecting off the sparkling ocean. To any outsider, it would have appeared as though our family vacation was the picture of happiness. Children laughing, couples strolling hand in hand, families enjoying the luxury around them. Yet, beneath the polished surface, a subtle tension had begun to take hold, growing quietly but unmistakably with each carefully orchestrated move I made. From the moment I awoke, I sensed a shift. Raphael and Monica were no longer casually dismissive. Their eyes occasionally flicked toward me, betraying an awareness that had been absent before. Diego, usually so lazy and detached, now observed my interactions with the children with a curiosity he could not fully hide. It was as if, piece by piece, they were beginning to understand that I was no ordinary participant in this vacation. That I was quietly orchestrating the days, steering experiences, and ensuring that their children were happier than they had anticipated. The morning began with breakfast in the hotel's sun-drenched dining hall. I had arranged for the children to sit with me, positioning myself at the center of attention without overtly asserting authority. Anna and Diego Jr. chatted animatedly about the plans for the day, and Raphael attempted to interject, only to find his words drowned out by the excited chatter I had nurtured. Monica, frustrated, glanced at me with thinly veiled irritation, but said nothing, realizing that her usual dominance over the household dynamic had no purchase here. After breakfast, I suggested a creative activity, a beach treasure hunt I had meticulously planned the night before. Hidden clues, small surprises, and interactive games awaited the children. The adults were invited along, but I had subtly ensured that they would be occupied with menial tasks, monitoring sunscreen, carrying towels, fetching drinks, while I guided the main event. As the hunt began, Raphael and Monica exchanged glances. She really put thought into this, Raphael muttered quietly. It's impressive, I smiled, pretending not to hear, letting the comment sit where it belonged, unacknowledged and understated, yet validating my quiet triumph. Midway through the hunt, a moment of revelation arrived. Diego stumbled over a clue I had placed, and I helped him read it, subtly guiding him toward the next step. Monica watched, and the look on her face was unmistakable. Recognition that the woman she had dismissed as overbearing or old-fashioned had, in fact, designed this elaborate and engaging experience for her own children. That afternoon, as the sun climbed high and the salt air stung our faces, I implemented the next stage of my plan. I had discovered that the hotel manager occasionally checked reservations for special privileges. In a quiet conversation the day before, I had mentioned, in passing, the children's excitement and my involvement in organizing their activities. By the time lunch rolled around, the manager had arranged a surprise, a complimentary ice cream cart arriving at our cabana, exclusively for our party. The children erupted with joy. Diego Jr. laughed so hard he fell onto the soft sand. Anna clapped her hands, and even Raphael and Monica found themselves caught up in the moment. Yet, beneath the laughter, I noted the subtle tension creeping into the adults' expressions. The realization was dawning. I had facilitated this, planned it, and orchestrated it flawlessly, all under their noses. That evening, after a long day of controlled activity and carefully curated fun, I sat quietly on my sweet balcony, sipping tea, reflecting on the power shift I was engineering. The family had underestimated me, and each day, each small victory, reinforced the truth. Assumptions about passivity and invisibility were their greatest mistake. But the true test of my influence arrived when I discovered a critical detail about the hotel. A member of the concierge team mentioned in passing that they could provide access to exclusive events for the person whose name was on the reservation. My name, my investment, my planning. The opportunity was clear. I acted with deliberate patience. I arranged for a special dinner at the hotel's private restaurant that evening, reserved exclusively under my name. It included a curated menu that catered to the children, a table overlooking the ocean, and a surprise performance that the concierge assured me would delight even the most discerning guests. I kept the plan secret, allowing the family to continue believing they were in charge of their own schedules. When the evening arrived, the reactions were telling. Raphael and Monica walked into the restaurant, expecting the usual standard experience. But the staff greeted me personally, confirming my role as the organizer of the event. Their expressions flickered between surprise and discomfort. Diego, who had lounged lazily all week, now looked on with admiration, a quiet acknowledgement of the meticulous planning I had invested. The children, oblivious to the underlying tension, were delighted. Anna squealed as she tasted her favorite dessert, and Diego Jr. clapped in excitement. Raphael attempted to maintain control, but I had anticipated every step, every detail, leaving him little room to assert authority. Monica, frustrated and flustered, glanced at me repeatedly, realizing that her assumptions about my passivity were false. The night's dinner became a turning point. While the children reveled, the adults began to recognize the quiet influence I had been exercising all week. I had not shouted. I had not demanded recognition, but my careful planning, my patience, and my strategic use of resources had allowed me to reclaim authority. They could no longer ignore me. By the following day, subtle signs of acknowledgement began to appear. Raphael asked for my opinion on an activity schedule. Monica, while still reluctant, deferred to my guidance regarding the children's meals and preferences. Even Diego, who had been the most dismissive, offered small compliments, noting the children's happiness and the smooth organization of events. Yet I knew the true test was still to come. They had begun to recognize my agency, my influence, but the deeper understanding, the full appreciation of the sacrifices I had made, and the strategic power I wielded, was still beyond their grasp. I prepared for the next stage with quiet anticipation. I had saved all correspondence, all receipts, every detail of my financial sacrifices and efforts. When the moment was right, I would reveal the depth of my commitment, the extent of my planning, and the care I had taken to ensure the happiness of those who had taken me for granted. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon that evening, painting the sky with deep purples and fiery oranges, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Each day of subtle control, each orchestrated moment of joy, had shifted the family dynamic. They had begun to feel the consequences of their neglect, and though they had not yet understood the full measure of it, the awakening had begun. The hotel that had initially represented potential humiliation and heartbreak had become a stage for my quiet victory. The children were joyful, the adults were attentive, and I had reclaimed the respect that had been denied to me for so long. And as I sipped my tea and listened to the waves crash against the shore, I knew that the final revelations, the true reckoning, were approaching. They would soon understand, fully and irrevocably, that the mother they had underestimated, the grandmother they had ignored, was a force they could not dismiss. The subtle game had begun. The awakening of consequences was in motion, and the quiet power I had harnessed was only the beginning of the reckoning to come. The morning of the 6th day dawned with a quiet tension in the air. The children were bright and cheerful, their laughter filling the suite, but the adults moved with a subtle unease I had cultivated carefully over the past few days. Raphael and Monica had begun to notice the extent of my involvement. The planning, the surprises, the children's delight, and a growing realization had begun to creep into their expressions. They had underestimated me. I decided it was time for the ultimate revelation. Everything I had done, the hours of labor, the meticulous planning, the money I had scraped together over months, the wedding ring I had sold, would now come to light. The timing was perfect. The children were playing in the pool. Monica and Raphael were adjusting to the subtle discomfort of noticing my control, and Diego was lounging by the deck, unaware that the day was about to change everything. I called a brief family meeting in our largest suite, suggesting a casual gathering with tea and snacks. The children, delighted, joined enthusiastically. Raphael and Monica exchanged uncertain glances but followed. Diego, curious, raised an eyebrow as he observed my unusual seriousness. "Before we start today's activities," I began, smiling softly, "there's something important I want to share." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had prepared. Every receipt, every record of the money I had spent, every note detailing the hours I had worked, the sacrifices I had made to make this trip possible. Raphael's expression shifted from curiosity to apprehension. Monica's lips pressed into a thin line, her phone momentarily forgotten. Diego, sensing gravity, leaned forward. I spoke calmly, each word measured but charged with emotion. For months, I saved every penny I could. I sold pies, sewed for neighbors, and yes, I even sold my wedding ring to make this vacation possible for all of us. I wanted to give you 7 days of happiness, of togetherness, of memories that would last a lifetime. I placed the folder on the table, opening it so they could see the receipts, the handwritten notes, the proof of my efforts. The children looked at the documents with curiosity, but Raphael, Monica, and Diego were frozen. staring at the evidence of my sacrifice. I did this not because I wanted recognition, I continued, my voice steady, but because I love you. I wanted to show you that being a family, truly being present for one another, is more important than convenience or comfort. And yet, I said, my eyes meeting theirs, for days, I have watched as you ignored my presence, dismissed my efforts, and even mocked me behind my back. Monica opened her mouth, but no words came. Raphael shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. Diego's usual nonchalance had vanished, replaced by a silent acknowledgement of the depth of my devotion. I took a deep breath. I am not invisible. I am not just here to serve or be taken for granted. I am your mother, your grandmother, and I have worked tirelessly to create joy for all of you. And now I hope you understand. Not just that I can plan, organize, and orchestrate, but that the love I put into these actions is immeasurable. The room was silent. The children, sensing the weight of the moment, were unusually quiet. Raphael finally spoke, his voice low and tinged with guilt. Mom, we didn't realize. We should have... Monica's eyes glistened with the beginnings of tears. Estella, I'm so sorry. We never understood how much work, how much effort you put into this. We took it for granted. Diego, rarely expressive, nodded. Mom, we didn't see it. I didn't see it. I'm sorry. I smiled, not with triumph, but with the quiet satisfaction of truth revealed. The week had been about more than just vacation. It had been about teaching, guiding, and showing the consequences of underestimation. They had begun to feel the impact of their arrogance, and now, they faced the reality of my devotion and sacrifice. The children, still unaware of the tension, returned to play, their laughter echoing through the suite. But for Raphael, Monica, and Diego, the weight of understanding had settled in. They had witnessed, finally, that the woman they had mocked, ignored, and underestimated was a force of love, patience, and resilience. Over the next few days, the family's behavior shifted. Raphael asked for my advice on scheduling activities, Monica engaged with me in planning meals and outings, and Diego began to take an interest in the children's happiness, checking in with me on details. The change was subtle, yet undeniable. By the final night of our stay, the atmosphere was transformed. The laughter of the children filled the air, genuine smiles from Raphael and Monica were present, and Diego engaged warmly with all of us. The vacation, which had begun with betrayal and indifference, had become a testament to patience, love, and the quiet power of persistence. As I watched the sunset from my balcony, a sense of profound peace washed over me. The awakening had been complete. My family had finally recognized the value of my efforts, the depth of my love, and the strength of my resolve. And in that moment, I knew something powerful. Respect, once earned through patience, sacrifice, and quiet strategy, could not be taken away. The hotel that had seemed like a stage for humiliation had become the place of revelation, reconciliation, and transformation. The mother they underestimated, the grandmother they ignored, had claimed her rightful place, not through confrontation, but through endurance, intelligence, and unwavering love. And as the waves crashed against the shore, I smiled, knowing that the lessons of this week would linger far longer than any vacation ever could. They would remember always that the woman they underestimated was not only present, but unstoppable. The 7th day of our stay arrived with a sense of quiet anticipation. I had watched my family slowly awaken to the truth of my sacrifices and influence, but there were still pockets of denial, lingering arrogance, and unspoken tension. Today, I decided, would be the final confrontation, the moment they would fully grasp the depth of my love, effort, and strategy. After breakfast, I invited Raphael, Monica, and Diego to the suite for a special family discussion, while the children prepared for an organized scavenger hunt I had arranged earlier. Their expressions were a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. I began calmly. This week has been about more than fun. It's been about understanding, about recognizing each other's efforts, and about learning how to value the people we often take for granted. I opened the folder again. The receipts, the notes, the proofs of my sacrifices laid bare. Raphael's face paled as he realized the full extent of what I had done. Monica's lips trembled. Diego, who rarely showed emotion, was silent, staring at the documents with a growing awareness of his own neglect. "I did this not for recognition," I said firmly, "but because I love all of you, and because I hoped, by showing dedication and patience, you would understand that taking someone for granted has consequences, not just for them, but for all of us as a family." There was silence. Then Raphael spoke, voice low and filled with genuine remorse. "Mom, we were wrong. We didn't see how much you did, how hard you worked for us. I can't believe we..." Monica reached out, tears welling in her eyes. "Estella, we were cruel without even realizing. I'm so sorry for underestimating you, for ignoring everything you've done." Diego finally added, "Mom, I didn't see it. I never understood before. Thank you for everything." I smiled softly, not with triumph but with quiet satisfaction. The acknowledgement I had longed for was finally here. The subtle power I had exercised, the patient planning, and the strategic orchestration of the week had achieved what direct confrontation never could. The final day of our vacation arrived, warm and golden, as if the sun itself were celebrating the transformation that had occurred. The family had changed. The arrogance, the neglect, the dismissiveness, all of it had been replaced by respect, gratitude, and genuine connection. That morning, I suggested a family photo session on the beach. Everyone agreed eagerly, smiling with a renewed sense of closeness. As we posed, I noticed Raphael whispering instructions to the children, Monica gently adjusting Anna's hair, and Diego laughing freely with his grandchildren. The subtle shift in dynamics was complete. I, who had once been invisible, had become the guiding presence, the heart of our family, and the anchor of our vacation. Later, we returned to the suite, where I revealed one final surprise, a scrapbook I had prepared before the trip, documenting my savings, my sacrifices, and the story of this week. Each page held not only memories of the vacation, but a lesson. Love requires effort, patience, and recognition, and those who are underestimated often possess the greatest strength. As Raphael, Monica, and Diego turned the pages, their faces reflected a mixture of awe, remorse, and gratitude. The children looked on, proud and excited, seeing their grandmother's dedication immortalized in tangible form. That evening, as the sun set over the horizon, we gathered for a final family toast. I raised my glass and spoke softly, but with authority, to family, to love, to patience, and to never underestimating those who care for us most. Raphael and Monica smiled, their earlier arrogance replaced by humility. Diego nodded, a rare but sincere gesture of acknowledgement. And for the first time in years, I felt truly seen, respected, and appreciated, not as a caretaker, not as a provider, but as the mother and grandmother who had quietly guided her family toward understanding and love. The trip that had begun with betrayal and indifference ended with revelation, redemption, and connection. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and mocked, but through patience, strategy, and unwavering love, I had reclaimed my place, earned respect, and taught my family the invaluable lesson of appreciation. As we packed to leave the Golden Palms Hotel, I took one last look at the ocean, the balcony, and the suites. This place had witnessed my pain, my sacrifice, and my triumph. And as I closed the door behind me, I carried with me not just memories of the week, but the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had transformed the hearts of those who had once doubted me. The journey was over, but the lessons would last a lifetime, and the respect I had earned would never again be questioned.